Okay, welcome to the June 11th meeting of the
Shut it off.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I don't know,
Thank
probably
you.
need to,
Well, there's something from there.
It's on the top of the side.
Sorry,
oh, that's okay.
because it's showing you are off. I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, again, welcome to the June 11th meeting of the Nantucket Airport Commission meeting. This is our first time hosting a hybrid meeting in the trailer at 131 Pleasant Street, so please bear with us. Should there be any hiccups, we'll do our best. The meeting is being conducted remotely in a hybrid fashion pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Here at the meeting tonight in person is Commissioner Buscarin, Commissioner Topham, and myself, Chair Gasparo. We do not have any members participating remotely, and as such, we won't need to take roll call votes tonight. Anyone who wishes to be acknowledged by the chair, there's no one here in the public at the moment, but by Zoom, please raise your virtual hand or speak out, and I will do my best to recognize you. And with that, and so this meeting is being both audio and video recorded. And with that, we'll turn to review and approve the agenda. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. And we have draft minutes from May 14th. Are there any questions, comments,
No.
concerns? We'll also adopt those by unanimous consent. And we have the warrants of May 22nd and June 5th to ratify. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Public comment. As I said, we don't have anyone here in the public. Do we have anybody online?
I have Pet Gentry, but he's the OPM.
He's
for
our
the
new
CHA.
OPM.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to pending leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1. Mr. Carver.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have sort of three batches for you. I'll have the normal items I'll take together, then two items I'd like to discuss separately, just because they are a little bit different. I have a host site agreement with Beta Technologies. Beta Technologies provides electric aircraft chargers. They would install at their cost. We would receive an annual business fee plus a 10% margin. They're installing a network of charging stations across New England. We are not the only airport. It would be cited by the flagpole, I believe. I have a license agreement with Jet East Incorporated. It's a $1,500 business fee. They provide airframe and power plant services in the summer to the GA, but also the commercial fleet. I believe we have this agreement because they stage a van with tools at the airport, and then they either fly over or they boat over for a maintenance call. But it's beneficial to both our customer base and the airport.
I had a question on that. If you've got so with the just they're a new operator, is that correct? Or did we have a contract with them last year?
We did.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we have a contract amendment with NTE Equipment Solutions. It's a no-dollar time extension related to delivery of our electric vehicle for parking enforcement. We have a $20,285 contract with Clean Harbors for pickup of the resin from the GAC filter changeout for disposal at a registered landfill off island. We have a $135,000 contract with Central Communications Services. This is 3 years of support and 3 years duration for support and testing of our terminal PA system. We have $90,400 contract. I guess it's a task order with McFarland Johnson for engineering services for repair of the fuel farm loading rack wall. We have design services with McFarland Johnson for the noise barrier. I'll take that separately. We have a contract amendment. I'll take a contract amendment with Robert B. Hours separately as well. The United Airlines agreement, it's on here as pending. It is not in yet. I'm just stopping to say I will be assessing unless the commission takes exception. A late agreement fee. They have been operating for some time and we do need that agreement in. Ameriflight came in via handout, correct?
Yes.
Ameriflight is the freight provider. They do that in concert with Wiggins. I believe they've actually merged, so they will be providing UPS freight services.
So Ameriflight is the parent company of Wiggins, and now they just take over the operations.
Also, Unify Aviation, to their credit, they're the ground handler for United and Delta Airlines. They did get us their agreement in time. It is late. They have been operating, but they have been in discussions with us about the agreement and their time frame. They did get it in for this meeting, so I would not seek to assess a late agreement fee to them. Pearl Construction, the contract did make it for Pearl Construction. This is for the modular and general contractor services associated with neighborhood employee housing or our dorm project. It's for $6,076,000. That's the result. They were the winner of request for proposal from which we received 4 bids. I believe that's it, except for the 2 items I pulled up. And so I would recommend your approval on all of those items, and then I would have 2 more for separate discussion.
Any questions, discussion?
Yeah, it's hard to believe they're gonna get this thing done in a year. Employee housing.
So I think it's an aggressive time frame, and Ted, I'd ask you to raise your hand if you're just available for questions. I don't know if I have any that the commission will ask for you, or I'll defer to you. It's an aggressive schedule. The critical lead time, and I'll address it later in my manager's report, is ordering the boxes or the modular units. So they're built and shipped and delivered. I did review a schedule with them, and I won't get too far ahead of myself, but they believe that's achievable.
Wow. Including transport, because they gotta have a barge to transport these things over here.
Yep, including.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, so I think to Pearl's credit, they have been working behind the scenes on logistics. They have made contact with the barging provider, and they've done this work on islands before.
Are they doing any of the Richmond properties or?
I don't recall if that's what they're doing, or if it's a separate development. But I know if Mr. Gentry would be able to answer that or not.
Okay.
Great. I'm glad we're at this point. You know, it's been a lot of years,
Mhm.
and so this is
I thought we were gonna
this is
get
a
a bid for
this is a milestone.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money, but it's, I think, gonna really put the airport where it needs to be to you know, be a solid ground, sustainable operation. It's just a fact of, I think, you know, operating here on the island and in the current housing climate. So with that,
I'm sorry, Noah, this is Ted Gentry. I'm sorry, I don't know if my face is showing. I've had a little trouble there signing in, but this contractor has worked on the island before, and they've worked with this modular company before. So it's I think they're very confident about being able to achieve the schedule that's been laid out for them.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Gentry.
Sure.
And with that, is there a motion to approve all of the items except for the contract for the sound barrier and I'm sorry, what was the other one that you pulled out?
A change order for Robert
Change
Biauer.
order for Robert Biauer.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, and then back to you. Mr.
Okay,
Carver.
I'm sorry for piecing these out, but things tend to happen in the summer more than in the winter. So what I have for you, it's a little bit unusual, but it's a pending change order or contract amendment with Robert Biauer. What it's for is limited emergency inlay repair to the center line for runway 624. The main runway was built with a joint on the center line, and this joint has been deteriorating. In past years, we repaired with sort of a heavier crack seal to fill that joint, and it's held very well. And so recently, The crack seal is now coming up in places. And if, will you be able to find that photo? Individually, the pulled up crack seal doesn't represent a safety and a certification issue, but collectively, as these items come up further and further, we start to get worried about, longitudinal cracking that could, cause an aircraft to lose steering control. We worry about cracks and holes that are deeper than FAA certification issues, and it becomes an issue where we have to close the runway and effect an emergency repair without the benefit of lead time in planning. So I consider it an imminent failure. I consider it an emergency. My intent is to utilize Robert B. Howard being on site and that they are already producing aviation grade asphalt to facilitate a limited milling and patch and markings project, which I would bring back to you as a formal contract for your consent or approval in August or July or August. The project that we're looking at would be runway 624 closures from 7 p.m. to 9 a.m. I don't have dates, but it would be soon. It would be in the next probably 2 or 3 weeks. It would probably be 2 or 3 closures to accommodate the work without inconveniencing our tenants. It's 6 to 7 locations. Each location is 120 feet long by 4 feet wide. That's the narrowest width of a milling machine. And about 2.5 inches deep. That would be the replacement paving. Based on unit price quantities from the South Ram project, we would expect approximately $90,000. This is a starting cost. It's before considering adding RPR services, a night work premium. So I don't have a not to exceed amount, but it would start at $90,000 plus an associated night work premium. It's our cost. It's not grant eligible, though I could potentially see if I could compete it for ASMP reimbursement at a later time. So what I am requesting from the commission is your permission to administer and approve work to start and keep going until I can bring it back for formal adoption from the commission. Otherwise, we'll face, I believe, a real emergency and probably before the next commission meeting.
I'm a little bit surprised that this wouldn't be an AIP operation.
That's what-
If there's anything that's important at this airport, it's the runway.
So
Without the runway, we do not have an airport. Can we talk to the FAA about that?
we can, and I have. We had a project set up for delivery. Really, what I think is because of some technical rules related to acceptance dates of FAA grants, we could not get an FAA grant extension of a couple days. FAA rules, they come from interpretation of FAA reauthorizations. And I think we reviewed it with the town as an emergency repair a while ago, and because we weren't at an emergency level, we didn't think we could convince the state to waive procurement rules. I agree. Typically maintenance on runways should be eligible. We did have an FAA spec'd project as an extension to avoid reconstructing the full runway. But because of timing and because of circumstances, we now find ourselves in this position. I agree. I'm going to continually, I think, bring this to the FAA because I think their cost to the system of a 1 week shutdown during the daytime of the runway is substantial. And they're avoiding a lot of cost by us taking on this repair.
When are we actually gonna do this?
We don't have a start date, but it would probably be within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Really? Okay, right in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, we'll do a nighttime closure right after the last scheduled JetBlue flight. And we'll open it back up in the morning by 7. Did I say 7?
9 to
9
10.
a.m. So that's built around the air carrier schedule.
Okay, so that's not gonna affect air carriers, only would affect private Part 91 operations.
Correct.
To use the other runway. The
Well,
crop
use the
is-
other runway if
Use the
Except
other
for the
runway or wait until we're back open.
okay,
I had the same question, so.
yeah.
And then the striping, the repainting of it, that would be also,
Included
Included
in
in this.
work.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's either included in this work or we'll do it with our painting supplies. I don't have that spec yet. I can't commit that it's a contractor responsibility versus a staff responsibility.
Is there a motion? And then, so I guess the question is, for the language of a motion, do we need a not to exceed or, chair authorization to sign? I'm just trying to make sure that we do this appropriately.
I think we have to have a set number.
So if you were at 90, and I don't want to hamstring you in any way, given that it's an emergency, is it not to exceed 200, something like that?
I would say the double it,
Works,
so
and is that okay with the commission?
Mhm.
Yes.
I believe we have Mr. Laston present. We could quickly defer to him on the NTE amount, if that's helpful.
Sure, I can jump in. So, Mr. Chair, the biggest difference is gonna be right now, we're using the contractor's bid pricing for South Apron, but this would all be night work. So there would be a premium for night work. So
Mhm.
that's what we're trying to work with the contractor to understand what the premium for night work would be. So double the prices should be sufficient.
Okay, so why don't we go with that then, if that's amenable to the commission, if there was we would entertain a motion to approve the contract amendment with Robert B. Hour for a price not to exceed 200,000.
Is that what you want a motion for?
Yes, please. I think that would be appropriate.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, how do you vote? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And now we have the contract on the noise barrier.
Third item, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit lengthy as well, but in your packet as a handout is a task order from McFarland Johnson for design, engineering and bidding services for the noise barrier. As we had previously directed, he brought the scope to us. I've given it initial review. I believe it addresses all of the work elements we've asked for. It has our consultant as HMMH to provide noise modeling and 4 alternatives for evaluation. It has resident project engineering services. The schedule is, within the lines of what we had sought to do as far as expediting. We are, as we're doing capital project planning and we're putting out those numbers, I'm comfortable beginning to put out costs. I think we're holding $5 million as an internal number for construction. And we are also planning on bringing the construction project to special town meeting in 2024. With an award to be made February, construction in the fall period. As far as price for the task order, this is an item that I wanted to really hold out for further discussion. The task order is nearly $700,000 on an estimated $5 million project, which is a lot. A rule of thumb is you don't want to exceed 10%, more likely 5% for design as far as a total project cost. I want to say McFarland is a good firm. They've worked for us. I've agreed with their approach, and the third-party independent fee reviews when we do them on AIP projects check out. But I do have concerns I wanted to discuss to recommend approval at this price. I understand and I'm okay with the scope items for geotech and noise analysis, but there are nearly $400,000 in field engineering and construction administration costs, and that's a lot of money, and that's airport money that I'm responsible for to our stakeholders and our ratepayers. So we do have some items that I'm looking for further direction. I can make staff available for a special commission meeting. I can work with Mr. Laston on this scope. We can move forward with this scope and at the same time look to see what we can do to reduce costs. It's also possible that in the future, the winning contractor may have a different approach to work that is not what we had imagined here, that's giving rise to the high amount of construction services. So I am looking for further direction. I believe we can make it work if we have to. but that might not be the best scenario. And I've also made sure Mr. Lassen is here, possibly to discuss in more detail some of those project engineering, resident engineering costs.
Yeah,
I thought this was, the berm was gonna cost us in the neighborhood of $1 million, as I recall. Cutting more trees, and as a result of, neighbors, we are now going to a wall, which is gonna cost us essentially 5 times more than we had originally estimated. And I'm kind of shocked by the size of that number. And since this is all our money, I'm just wondering how much money we're gonna have to borrow. I know Jamie is headed out the door, and but budgeting this as a capital project seems to be much more than we ever heard before. So I'm quite surprised. I don't know, were you surprised to hear this kind of a number?
on the design.
Yeah.
I mean, the cost of the wall, not so much. I think that, I think we were at about 2 million. We were at 1 million 4 years ago on the berm. And then I think when it got wrapped, these are rough numbers from my recollection. I think we were into a couple of million when it was part of the overall project, but that was funded. Due to the soils sequestration, if you will.
Right.
Approach to it. And then, right, the construction of a new standalone structure, in my mind was in the, double that again, the 4 million, I wouldn't have been, for a it's a quarter mile
Yeah,
long, a little bit longer.
and it may end up being longer than that.
And, understanding that a structure like that needs to be rather substantial, given wind loads,
Oh, yeah.
off of, a wide open runway. But what I would like to have, that I feel like it was what we committed to, and it's, I think that the berm would have really served the purpose that this would have as well, but there was such a level of concern out of that, and that, I think we agreed that we'd go in another direction. But I'd really like to talk about at the design level, and one of the things that I'm really wondering about, if we were to approve this, I think we have two options. We can approve it here, or we can ask some questions and ask that it gets looked at a little closer if possible. But it seems to me, I haven't had a lot of time to look this over, but it seems to me there would be some duplication of effort based upon the ongoing, that the survey, the geotech work that was done for the south ramp. I understand that this is adjacent to that, but clearly they didn't design the ramp only under the exact footprint of the ramp, and or for example, geotech borings. I wonder why that absolutely need, Mr. Lassen, perhaps you could speak to that. Is it an absolute that needs to be redone? I think there's $80,000 in there for that. When is there not data that could reasonably be relied on? Outwash plane materials combined with the investigations, immediately adjacent to the ramp. So that's one thing. Another has to do with, utility markout. I would have thought that all of that would have been part of the south ramp. So I guess what I'm asking is, it seems like there'd be some duplicative things here, and maybe we need, understanding we asked you to move fairly quickly on this. You're covering it, but is there a way to give us a level of assurance that if that information was able to be relied on to the maximum extent possible or used, then there wouldn't be duplicate work? I understand factors of safety and wanting to, you're going to put in a structure of $4 million magnitude, perhaps. But I'd really like to know that, to see us be able to reduce the cost of the design using information, hopefully from the ongoing project. And do you think that might be possible?
So a couple things. There is no survey. We have all the survey from the previous project, so we're utilizing all the existing survey. The geotech itself for pavement design, geotechnical borings only go 10 feet down. For structures like this, the structural engineer is looking for borings that are 40 feet deep because this wall has to not only hold itself up, but it has to keep itself from rotating with the wind loads on this. So the borings are significantly deeper than highway borings. So that's the big difference in the price of the geotech borings.
Fair enough. That's,
Yep.
you know, this is a good
Yep.
discussion and, you know,
Yep.
I think.
No, understood,
I
understood.
understand. It's helpful.
Yeah, I understand completely. And yes, this was a last minute thing and unfortunately Noah and I didn't get a chance to discuss this a lot. The construction phase services is directly associated with time of construction. We've had a bunch of discussions in the office. It's our opinion that it's going to be 4.5 months to build this wall. Now we can go back and talk some more to see if that's maybe there was more factor of safety in there than originally thought, but that's the thinking is that this wall is about 4.5 months to build this wall. Oh, you guys went mute.
We're
there you are.
muted.
There
Okay.
you go.
We've talked in the past about design alternatives.
Yep.
And is that, and again, I just didn't have the time to really dig into this, but have we settled based on this on the design that would essentially be, you know, poured in place, or pre-concrete versus an alternative material?
We have not looked at that. We first want to get the analysis done by HMMH to see what the best wall type is. And then once we get the best wall type, that will help drive how the wall is built. There are currently 3 ways to precast this wall. It's either a precast concrete wall, there is a plastic wall, and there is a wooden wall. It's wood lathing essentially stood inside a steel frame. Cast in place, we have not had that discussion yet. We'd have to understand if your island-based firms could do that.
I have confidence they could, but we can
Okay.
see the head, but
I don't know. I honestly don't know if your firms have done something like this before. You would know that.
no, I can't think of other than, you know, double high type foundation walls.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think, you know, above grade, maybe not, but subsurface probably.
Yep.
So probably not that different.
So,
Um, so,
yes, Noah and I are prepared to discuss this further. In all fairness, he just got this price today. He did get a chance to review the scope, but the price came together very quickly in the last couple of days, waiting for some prices for some subconsultants.
and then I know this will be further on the design, but I'm curious as to your initial thinking on this. You know, I think that the higher the top of the barrier,
Mhm.
and I know this is something that'll come through HMH, but the more effective it's likely to be. And the grade changes quite a bit from the south end of the new ramp to where it meets the existing ramp, the existing grade on the west side.
Yep.
In your mind, is this wall following grade? And the top of the wall would actually slope with grade, or would we be able to, you know, pick a high point and then we would run it level and the wall would be of varying height?
So typically the wall follows the profile of the road that it's next to. In this case, it would follow the profile of the parking ramp.
Yeah.
We can have a uniform top on it. That's
Yeah,
sort
I
of
think that might be something to
preference.
discuss or think about. You know, I know it might change the design a little bit. And I'm not trying to dictate a design. I'm just bringing up
Yeah.
having just done a site visit and really
Yeah.
noticed that there's more grade change than I anticipated. And if there was a way to use some fill, if you
Yes.
would, on the other side to, you know, that helped you to gain any kind of height, then I think that increases the effectiveness of the wall. So that could be part of something that we look at. I mean,
And this wall does assume some kind of a return, as we talked about, a return on one or both sides.
yeah,
So this sort of price construction package assumes that it's going to be longer than the 1,200 feet shown on the drawings because of the turn or angle back to the runway on one or both sides.
I mean, I hope that the design would be less, but I also, it's that as you guys work on this, if we were going to approve it, that it's absolutely a not to exceed and
Mhm.
what could be done at staff level and working with you, Mr. Lasden, to
Yep.
keep those costs down. And I think we made a commitment to the
Well,
project.
There's no question we made a commitment to the
Mhm.
project. I'm just a little surprised about the cost of the project. I think we
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
move ahead, and I would favor approving getting started on it right now. I think delaying another month would be a mistake from a public relations point of view. So I'd just like to know how much we're gonna have to borrow to make this work, because I think we do need to get the wall done. We promised the town that we'd build this wall, and I think we should honor that promise.
Agreed.
So let's move ahead. I'm just taken aback by the cost.
Right, likewise. And perhaps as part of this design exercise, one of the, material types, perhaps would be less expensive. I mean, I guess that's the question. Is there an option that will achieve the objective, have the longevity? It's hard to have everything,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Something's gonna last the 50+ year design life, I assume, withstand all of the loads, and be inexpensive.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, part of that, as I mentioned earlier, there's three options that we're looking at. And part of that, to Mr. Biscarin's point of view, part of that has to do with the lead time on this. If it's precast, either plastic or concrete off the island, it probably has a much longer lead time than perhaps if it's wood, or if it can be built on the island. So from a PR point of view, yes, you want to have longevity, but if the idea is to get something built quicker, one of the other potential options might be the answer.
All right, I think we'll have to talk about that after you get into this.
Yes.
I mean, my sense would be,
Mhm.
we will have to weigh that.
Yeah.
Right, as you are able to bring us some kind of a 25% design or discussion for wherever you and staff might need a little bit of direction. As to weighing that sort of those alternatives. Thank you. With that, is there a motion to approve or deny, or a motion to approve or to take no action, one or the other, on this contract?
I would move to approve the contract.
Is there a
And I'll
second? Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you for pulling that together, Mr. Laston. Okay, back to you, Mr. Carver.
Okay. In your packet is an application from Mr. Hanlon on behalf of the Nantucket Flying Association for the Summer Youth Program event from June 24th to 28th. The application outlines their use of the facilities and the fee waivers requested for aircraft related to the event. This camp has been held successfully for my tenure here without incident. In my opinion, it provides an aviation purpose consistent with our mission, and I would ask for your support for the application and associated fee waivers.
Any questions regarding that? Is there a
I'll make
motion?
Motion.
to approve the fee waiver?
Approve it.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks to the Flying Association for keeping the program going.
Project.
Really is. Back to you, Mr. Carberg, for
Okay.
pending matters.
So on pending matters, begin with the South Ramp expansion project update. I have, I think, 8 bullets for you. As of today, we are at 98 of 150 calendar days completed, or 65% of the way through the project. Production paving began on June 3rd and will last for approximately 30 work days until July 12th. Five, I think that might be 6 catch basins now have been replaced on the existing ramp and will be complete by the week's end. Mitigation work is ongoing for species net benefit in Area 1. Topsoil has been spread with almost all of it seeded except for the islands adjacent to Taxiway Echo, and those should be done next week. The temporary fence has been removed to accommodate production paving. We're working with the resident engineer and air traffic control to have Taxiway Echo open by completing the paving work where the fillet meets the taxiway prior to Film Festival weekend. We may even have both Juliet and Lima complete this week. We will have a request for additional days to perform fall mitigation work. I expect that for the July meeting. And we're working with long lead times for the light poles and the national grid connection. They're not impacting our schedule to take ownership and operation of the ramp. They are just long lead time items, which we're tracking. For PFAS, I have 2 items for you. The PFAS table is in your packet, but I have no major updates on that. But what I do have are 2 other items. Mass DEP is conducting an audit of our phase 2 document. An audit is a fairly routine step for a regulated party under 21E. The audit included an inspection and review of our conceptual site model with our new case manager and our existing case manager at Mass DEP, as well as our LSP. This occurred on site with the facility and an airfield tour. During that tour, Mass DEP staff had mentioned that they received calls about the noise berm and the South Ramp project. We reviewed both the South Ramp project site and the sand pit, and Mass DEP had no concerns with our project or our approach. One issue we discussed with them is expanding what's known as the disposal site boundary to include airport gas, as the airport owns that property and there are PFAS impacts there. We are also the property owner, and we have liability for that contamination, even if we were not the source. We are working with the LSP to submit an amendment to the phase 2 that includes that revised boundary. And then it's typical that we would receive written documentation of any site audit, and we look forward to reviewing their findings when we receive them and address any improvements if they're needed at that time. A second item is related. As part of that audit, we were able to have informal discussion with Mass DEP about the recent EPA drinking water standard. I stress that this is an informal conversation. It's not like receiving a regulatory letter. And Mass DEP staff, in my view, were sharing their organization's viewpoint as to what they saw the future direction of state regulation. And, we shared our approach as well. Mass DEP may be considering matching the EPA drinking water standards, and that would take place in the next 12 to 18-month time frame. So again, my take is that they're stressing this is not a formal rulemaking notice, but they want regulated parties, of which Nantucket is one, to know what direction the organization is thinking prior to formal rulemaking, as it may help regulated parties like us make informed decisions. So there's a formal process to the rulemaking and promotion of state rules, and if that happens, that will come later. But I think it's helpful in that it gives us notice in deciding what kind of services we're going to bring to our neighbors. And given that DEP gave us sort of notice of their future direction, that there is now a federal standard on the books, the EPA regulation, we're working with our licensed site professional to identify an additional set of homes to connect to town water. I don't want to speak to that list right now. We rely on the LSP to review the detailed guidance and identify the homes. And they'll do that for us to see which ones would qualify under the new EPA standard. But we would follow the same process that we used previously. So the steps are right now that we work with our LSP to identify the homes that we would connect. That's in progress, and we would reach out to those homeowners and notify them. We'd work with legal counsel to document our revenue use justification to the FAA, given the new and likely state change. That's happening next. And then we would spec and bid procure the plumbing and water connection services like we had done in the past. And this can take the place in 2 different ways. We can lead a project where it's our engineer and our engineer performing the services, or we can do sort of a reimbursement approach, like the insurance adjustment approach. If your car gets hit by someone and it's evaluated and someone can cut you a check and you can decide what to do with the repairs. We've already had one homeowner reach out to us, who is undertaking their own connection, and we've informally asked them to keep their receipts. Well, if you do your connection, we'll want to evaluate what you're doing, with the goal of a reimbursement. So I think, that's a significant update. I think it's something we've wanted to work for, and the sort of the update from Mass DEP and the EPA standard helps us with that. So I'll pause there before I move on to my other two updates.
What is the new federal standard for drinking water, PFAS and drinking water?
It's complicated, but it's generally 4 parts per trillion for, I believe, 7 different compounds.
That's almost unachievable.
It's very low.
Yeah. I also hear there is a article coming out in the Inc. in the short term regarding PFAS island-wide, which is going to be an eye-opener. I don't know. I haven't seen that yet, but I think that's on the way.
Yeah, my commentary, I think we've been working with PFAS, for a long time. I think we're ahead of other airports. We might be ahead of other homeowners or other groups in the town. And what I think we've always advised, and the commission has done a good job of advising, is we have to learn to live with PFAS. And we've taken that approach into how we manage our soil. We can't just snap our fingers and get rid of it all. But we can do things like manage it appropriately. We can manage home connections. Mark will want to comment. Water has been a great help with all of this. Our aquifer is clean, and it's a great solution to bring to affected homes.
I've never seen any evidence that the aquifer was ever measured to a number. I read an article in the Inc. that it met standards. It didn't say what standards, when it was measured, anything like that. It was quite vague. And I would be shocked to find out we've hooked up all these towns at a cost of $8 to $9 million with town water, which exceeds 4 parts per trillion. I'd be surprised if it does meet 4 parts per trillion, but I've never seen any measurement of that. We've never had any, there's never been any disclosure by Wanacoma Water about that.
I can't speak to that. All I know is that they have tested to the state standards at 20, and they've met the state standards.
Well, that's the first time I've heard that number being used with regard to the water supply by Wanacoma Water.
I think this is positive. We were in a position where there was I think dozen homes or so that were under the 20 but had a detect.
Yeah.
Reasonably concerned. I think several folks or just maybe even your general public didn't understand the way that the airport was essentially preempted from under grant assurances and revenue diversion requirements to be able to do that. And now we can, I think, is what I'm hearing, or should be able to. So I see it as positive, and look forward to moving in that direction. And hopefully, some of the folks who said, or some of the claims that are made, that we aren't doing, the airport isn't doing what they should be doing, is clear that we're doing everything that we in fact can do. And this is again headed in that direction.
That's a very important point. We're kind of at the mercy of our regulators.
Without,
we can only do what our regulators
And-
tell us we can do.
and the goal post moved a bit here now, and now we can do more.
Yes.
And we will.
Yes,
And I think that's the commitment,
we have to do.
right? Well, yeah, I think is we can.
Yes.
I think that's the positive, and it's so, I think that the fact, sort of like where we started 4 or 5 years ago with the water line to Matacasham, it was poets in the interim doing again the best we could. The municipal water is the real, at significant cost, but at doing the cost of doing the right thing, and we continue to do that. So I hope that's recognized, and let's let the LSP work on it, make sure that we're following all appropriate, guidance, stay in good graces and compliance, with the FAA and the grant assurances, and keep moving in the right direction. So thank you.
For the crew quarters project, we held a project kickoff meeting with Pearl Construction and the OPM. We discussed a draft schedule I don't have it for a public document yet, but I will relate the following. Critical path is the delivery of the boxes. We'd like to have them this fall for spring occupancy. The contractor would also prefer not to be working on site on Nantucket into the spring and summer 2025. They seem like great people, but I would also not like to be working with them in spring and summer of next year. I'd like us to all be done. Pearl shared with me a logistics plan. This is a good document. They've identified several ways to work with the site and the bike path. They plan to fence the site completely with chain link fence and have a gate on the inside of the bike path. So the bike path is not affected, not blocked. And there should be enough room to pull trucks in off of Nobody Farm Road, stop in front of the bike path, open the gate, and do so without interrupting street traffic or bike path traffic. We identified sewer work as likely starting post Labor Day. We fully understand this is a busy road. There are 2 schools along this road and it's crowded as it is. So we will need to develop a construction work and paving plan with multiple stakeholders, including the schools, town administration, police department, and fire departments. We will initiate this conversation and we will plan the work and repaving accordingly. I don't want anyone to jump to conclusions that we are going to shut down the road in the middle of the day for the first week after Labor Day. We are going to work with everyone and find a plan.
Might I suggest on that we consider whether there'll be an alternative to seek a waiver from the select board to allow night work.
That's very much part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think that that's the right way to do that. There are some residents in the area. It's not a highly residential area. And the impacts of shutting down that main corridor. The only other time I could think of would be school vacation week, honestly. And it's probably too far out, for that. So and even with delayed start on the work, and if they could do that overnight, not dissimilar to what the town has done in the last 8 months or so with the third force main project.
And then on the terminal optimization project, we also had a site meeting with McFarland Johnson and the OPM last week. We reviewed the project schedule. We're showing that we're pursuing project funding under the Bill ATP program in both 2025 and 2026. We're looking to complete the program definition document in August. This PDD looks at what we wanted to do from the charrette, see if it's feasible and if it meets all of our goals and conditions of success. In August or September, we will have the architectural team. You may remember Jonathan McCready and his team previously. We will have them present their status and the Revit model to the commission. The Revit model, I think it's neat, but they can also discuss as professional architects how they can use it effectively to plan improvements. From a programming review, we did they performed an initial programming review. The optimization and infill plan can meet our space goals as far as how we would need to program our space. Numbers are only part of the aspect, though. Part of what an architect does is work on the flow and use of the space and see if that meets its needs. Just because you have the raw number of square feet doesn't mean that it would necessarily work for the concept. And then for initial stakeholder outreach, we've really identified limited outreach at this time, and it's to the Airport Commission, TSA, and the airlines to help guide that initial design. Any questions on those 2 items?
None.
Thanks.
No,
In your packet, I put the right whale vessel speed restrictions. We've been working with the town in a supporting role as they publicize the devastating impacts that the proposed right whale speed restrictions would have on ferry services to the islands. There are a few things that I think are important to note. The first is that we all care deeply about the right whale, but no one has ever spotted one in the sound. So this seems unnecessary.
no,
The speed restrictions already exempt a number of local waterways such as Buzzards Bay and Long Island Sound. There's no reason Nantucket Sound shouldn't also enjoy the same exemption. Ms. Gibson, the town manager, and I have discussed that in some corners, there's a perception that this restriction might benefit the airport. We both messaged that we don't think it will. We rely on the steamship for the same services it provides the town and the community, and that support our community. While we would all like to see a return of Hyannis service at the levels from a decade ago, the pilots, planes, and crews just aren't there, and not to ramp up in such a short time period. Items for the commission to consider is if we would like to offer an additional letter of support from the airport commission, similar to that other boards have taken. My recommendation is that we would write a letter for the chair to sign on behalf of the commission, supporting the select board and the town manager's position.
That's fine.
You guys agree?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll do that by unanimous consent.
I will draft that letter. For finance, on update on the capital approval process for grant funded projects. Related to the 2021 town meeting. Last week in successive meetings, I attended the FinCom and Select Board meetings to discuss the capital approval process for continued environmental monitoring. I included my packet item for those boards in this packet as well, but I'm not going to go through it. I wanted to thank the respective chairs, Ms. Crono and Ms. Moore, for their review and recommendations and approvals. Both boards asked insightful questions and moved this item forward. Consistent with the bylaw language, we are advertising the select board's approval in the local paper. The function related to the charter and the same language that we kept is if 10 voters take exception to this process for raising capital, they can appeal it by right to annual town meeting, which is certainly their right. So we will continue to track this on the agenda for one more month. Moving on to potential capital project requests. As a handout, I have a final airport and staff capital project list. I have this forward to receive your comments and endorsement of this list or the set of projects from the list, and I'm planning on keeping it on the agenda as we go through the town approval projects, as some projects can change or receive pressure to change during the regulatory board review. And quite honestly, this serves two functions for me when I present these projects to different boards. It's helpful for me to say this has the weight and endorsement of the airport commission. And if the project changes too much or evolves too much from what I presented or what you envisioned, I think it's something that I should bring back and be able to get future direction on. So the next step in the capital process is to submit our official project list and supporting materials to the town by June 16th. I've notified the town that some of these are still a work in progress. We're working with them as best as we can to meet their schedule. What I am highlighting here, I have 4 items which are changes from what I presented in the previous meeting. The first is continued environmental permitting. This was approved by the select board last week. I'm keeping it on this list in case it's petitioned by 10 voters into the town meeting. If not, it will come off this list. For the ARF station improvements, I'm adding language in the design to look at solar ready or solar panel install as part of the roof replacement. It's not a commitment. It's just a recommendation based on recent staff and town conversations. For the south ramp noise barrier, we are taking this to special town meeting in 2024, September of 2024 for authorization. If it is approved, then it will be removed from the list, but keeping it on the list now preserves our flexibility for that process. And then I have a new project, which is the FBO solar roof design. FBO solar roof design. It's new, and it came from the same conversations that we had with staff and town. It's not a commitment to the project. But we would like to have funds available should a third-party project make sense from a fiscal or other grant standpoint. There are a number of grants out there for design and construction. My position is that I'm for pursuing sustainability projects, but the economic payback has to make sense, and it has to make sense for a private party to take this on. I don't think we should be doing solar at below cost for the airport. Good. So that is the project list that we have up. I've only highlighted the color coded ones. But all of those are open for conversation and review. And it's something that I will keep on the agenda as we go through the process, which takes well into the spring.
I think I would just, I'm sorry, does anybody have any comments? I would just again mention that hopefully we can get some more information, the 5 million on the RF for repairs, you know.
I'm sorry, and I should have mentioned that. That includes the costs, which are really unknown at this time, of decommissioning and removing the foam mixing and supply system. We had a foam room for AFFF that would mix, pump, and supply foam into the ARF trucks, and we're looking to, decommission, take it off island, store it in a registered landfill. So that's driving a lot of the high and unknown costs at this time.
Okay. So I don't think you need any action on this, do you? Just to keep us informed.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And then I think we're on to the general fund repayment proposal.
Okay. So for the general fund repayments, this is a discussion we have every year, and this is no different, so I will set it up for you. There's an item in your packet as well. Beg your pardon. You have it up. So this is our annual review and approval, so we will need a vote from the commission of an amount for the annual repayment to the town. We usually have some discussion around this, so I was going to present the past discussion and the outgoing finance manager's recommendation. Per the MOA with the town, we annually pay $235,000. We also supply pavement millings to the DPW, the value of which we can deduct from the $235,000 owed. In each of 22 and 23, we paid the $235,000 payment, an additional payment of $500,000, and we chose not to have the amount reduced by the in-kind services we provided. And each year we discussed whether or not to take that approach at the time. This year, Jamie has recommended that we make our standard $253,000 payment and an additional payment of $513,000 from which we would not deduct the value of in-kind services. And this would close out the amount owed to the town under the repayment. A couple of pros, I think one is psychological. I don't want to give the wrong impression about my peers at the town, but I don't like owing the town money the same way I don't like paying a car payment. Another pro is that it opens up a surplus of $253,000 in fiscal year 25 and 26 budgets that we could use to other items. A con is that this amounts to a 0% loan. So typically you would not want to put your funding towards your lowest bearing interest rate. And another con is that having sort of room available in this agreement, whether it's for indirect services or another item such as what we use to have the town repay us for past due Delta Field rent payments. It's a valuable item to have to use with the town, not as negotiation or leverage, but as something comes up that the town might not have budgeted for, they have this sort of ability to draw from without authorizing
The town
appropriate
never
funds.
paid us for the Delta Fields, what they owed us.
They did, we took it, they paid us through this repayment to the town in 2022. It came off of our tab, if you will.
Personally, I like having a tab with the town more than I want to have it paid off. I think that as long as we have this arrangement with them for the millings that they have a use for that we're generating, and let's say we completely pay it off, are they still likely to either then pay us for the millings or stop using them or do it to another source, and then we're going to start stockpiling them? To me, I would support paying the dedicated amount to 235, not deducting the millings, but not paying it off completely. I think we're better off. So when things come up, that's sort of the method of transfer back and forth, as opposed to expecting them to cut a check
Which
you
they
will.
don't do.
Well, I don't want to go there, it's just I think it's just yes, we all would like to have, things paid off, but I think that this is a beneficial relationship for both parties. Is how I would see it. And we're not talking about huge amounts. They continue to get material they need. We're generating that material. That'd be my sense. That's what I would favor. I wouldn't pay it all off.
Why did Jamie want to pay it all off?
Jamie's recommendation is that she finds better value in clearing availability in future operating budgets. I think Jamie's concern is always, and I'm putting words in her mouth, but I think her concern has really been over long-term proper debt stewardship. And if we do take on debt, that becomes an operating item expense, our interest and principal payments. So I believe I'll repeat myself. It helps her with long-term debt management.
I'd be inclined to accept Jamie's recommendation rather than, and pay this off. The 513, or if Arthur could be negotiated, I would pay the larger part of that off. Since we only have 3 people here, I essentially have a veto over what's going on.
Well, that's fine. Again, I don't think this is a hill to
And I
die
don't
on.
mean to pressure anybody here, but I like paying off our debts, and I would take Jamie's recommendation. I would consider if Arthur wants to change his position on just paying off the 235. Say if you wanted to pay 300 of the 513, I would certainly consider that as a negotiated thing to do.
May I suggest a compromise? At least starting.
That's what I'm here to do.
Sure.
I'd like to get an agreement since there are only 3 of us here, but I favor paying off the 513.
I would suggest at a minimum, we pay off our 235,000 from which we do not deduct the value of this year's in-kind services, which were $67,000, which would be,
That puts you at the 300.
which would be calculator math, somewhere above 300.
And did you
As a
talk
minimum.
about that, doing that with Jamie or not?
Jamie, if Jamie were here, she would recommend to pay off the full debt.
And if I may, just in sort of somewhat of a rebuttal, I think that absolutely from a pure business and money management, it makes a lot of sense. But I think part of where we're at is balancing that with, I don't want to call them political realities so much as co-relationships, if you may have with the town, and that, it works. What happens next year when it's paid off and they want $67,000 worth of millings? Are they gonna pay us for those? Are they gonna maybe not be as inclined to use them?
Okay,
And now you're not getting any of that and you're gonna end up stockpile of millings. So that was part of where I was thinking. You've got a product that they want that you're generating that comes off of that. So it's almost like, what's our other option with those? Are we gonna try to manage selling those to the open market versus having currently a sort of I think I see it as a relationship that works on that basis. So that, that was my thinking of it. Pure money management, absolutely. I never questioned her, but
I would
That's
go for
why.
paying off $400,000 to include the in-kind services. That'd be my position.
or we could hold it for a whole commission. It's not a rush
That's
on
what I was
this
gonna suggest,
either,
but-
right?
Let's do it with this.
Or is there for a close of fiscal year?
I think it's a close of fiscal year item. We need to give direction.
That's the end of June, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be up in July. They decided to-
So I mean, we're at 300, which is
Yeah.
what you originally said,
Yeah.
with the 235 plus the in-kind,
Is there
250.
any exigency with regard to this decision?
There is, we need to give direction to town finance before the close of the fiscal year, which is
I'll
the end
go
of
for
the
the
month.
300,000 decided today. And
So-
not wait till July.
So it'll be the 300, so it'll be the millings, it'll be what we will pay will be 300 minus the milling, so it'll be 240 or 230, something like that.
Right,
Sure, I
I'll
agree.
agree with
Is that the motion?
yeah, that's my
I'm-
motion.
I'm comfortable with that. I won't calculate the exact
Yeah,
amount for the
okay.
motion.
If you're comfortable, then I'm gonna approve.
Okay, motion been made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And really, I think it's only gonna leave one more year of this. I mean,
Right.
it's been a 14, 11.
I understand the
Yeah.
attention to the town and how that may benefit us.
Okay, so moving on to the letter to the FAA regarding the noise abatement chart.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep this briefer than my notes. In your packet, staff has drafted a letter for the commission for the chair's signature related to the FAA chart supplements. At full strength commission, we have 3 pilots. They probably very much understand what the chart supplement does and accomplishes. The FAA is retooling sections 2 and 3 of the chart supplements and how airports can request or display noise abatement information. So what we've written in response to the FAA's request for comments is, reservation of rights for airports to really fully populate section 3 of the chart with figures or voluntary protocols, or other items that they find important for their, in support of their programs, in support of their community. So with that, we would recommend the commission adopts this letter for signature and sending.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank
Aye.
you for preparing that. And on to the grant awards.
Okay, we have, let's see here. So we have 4 grant awards. I'm going to discuss all of them and hopefully we can take a vote in bulk. As a reminder,
Just 3.
just 3?
3, the other 2 are on pending. still.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, help me out here.
10, 11, and 12.
Yes.
10,
83.
11, and 12. Okay. 83, 84.
So the
and
reimbursable for
32.
taxi with G,
Okay.
our truck and the S&P.
So 82 and 85, we don't have. Got it.
Yes.
Okay. AIP 83 is the state share for the portion of the taxway golf work that was under the reimbursable grant. So this is the separate FAA grant through Tech Ops for moving and resplicing the FAA fiber optic cable. That is why it is such a low amount, because it was a small grant. It was not the full amount of the grant, $7,410.06. AIP 84 is the state share for our new ARF truck purchase. I believe we've already processed the federal share. So that 5% is $48,280. And then we have been awarded a Mass DOT grants through their ASMP program. These are 80% cost share grants by the state. It is a great program that they run and still have been able to run for us. So they are covering $712,800 from the concrete hard stand project that we completed this spring. So I would recommend approval of all 3 items.
Any
I'll make
discussion?
that motion.
A second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll accept the money. And that brings us on to Mr. Smith's planning board application. We
Okay.
have Mr. Smith here with us. Come on up if you'd like, Mr. Smith.
So I'll give a brief introduction and then I'll turn it back over to the chair. I've corresponded with Mr. Smith regarding his planning board application for his leasehold that was awarded through an RFP in the bunker area for a combined impound and self-storage use. I'd expressed concern with the submission for yesterday's planning packet, and that planning packet is in your board. Mr. Smith and his agent did withdraw the application from the planning board. At my recommendation, or I've recommended Mr. Smith attend to discuss his proposal with the commission and for the commission to give any further direction that they have, as I had questions related to both the planning board submittal and a revised drawing that he provided to me. Specifically, the issues that we've been discussing is that the RFP and lease require that approximately 6,700 square feet and a minimum of 15 spaces be provided for impound. The original drawings didn't reflect that. The revised drawing that he provided me did reserve 15 spaces, but did not reflect the square foot requirement. I had questions on the number of customer spaces, some engineering questions related to the turning radius and layout of the roads, and then access by customer, frequency of use, and backup into the road. If this was going to be homeowners storing material and accessing once per quarter, or something like a landscaper storing tools and accessing them daily, because those would all have different impacts on traffic flow. Mr. Smith is here with us, so Mr. Chair, it's to you.
Thank you. So I trust you all saw the materials in the packet. So we've had an opportunity to see the site plan. We're familiar with the RFP. Just quickly, I'll just read sort of for the public what was proposed, and then Smith kind of tell us how you might change it or explain it to us as well. But essentially, the applicant's proposing construction of 2 fixed warehouse buildings, installation of a 3rd building utilizing multiple storage containers. I believe there's 34 that are shown on the site plan, configured to resemble a singular storage building and 2 driveways in a one-way counterclockwise direction, which does require a review of the planning board. There's a little bit more detail in a letter from his engineer regarding the parking spaces. Parking is provided with 5 spaces, and they believe that only 4 are needed for the application. And I understand there might be some changes, but with that, the floor is yours, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been working on this specific project for about 11 years now. I remember seeing you quite a bit at the board meetings along with Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, an unexploded World War II bomb was found and my lease was canceled 11 years ago. So I'm back up and I won a lease. One of the things that I have to do now is tow and impound of the airport parking lot. Just wanted to give you a brief synopsis of how that's gone. It's been pretty interesting, kind of actually fun. We've got somebody died and left a car, so we got that car. We got a giant machine, a heavy equipment machine, and also somebody just left a car there for the last 8 months and it's infested with rats. So we've processed all those vehicles so far. What I have proposed right now is storage and warehousing. My ideal customer, just to touch on that, is someone that puts their outdoor furniture in once a season and brings it out once a season. That's the ideal customer. I'm sure I'll have a blend of different customers. We created a self-storage warehouse on the other side of the airport coffin pit a few years ago, and it's just a blend of all kinds of different customers. So my ideal customer would be somebody that doesn't show up a couple of times a year, to answer the question there. What we have proposed right now are a couple of buildings. I think we're probably going to take those buildings out for now, table that, and talk about just an impound area, just to simplify things. This lot, I don't think we've talked about this yet. I think we've been leasing for about 6 months now. It was encumbered by a paper road, which we kind of all didn't expect. It's slowed me down quite a bit because I haven't been able to get permits for anything. Good news last night at the planning board meeting, your engineer Paul Santos was able to expunge that paper road, which is just awesome news. I've been advancing without permits, and now I can actually get the permits that we need. So I want to apologize for any confusion about me advancing, and just let you know and implore to you that I am working with Dan Malloy, one of the best guys around, to get these permits done. I'm sure you guys, I think you've worked with Dan before many times, so we'll be up to the planning board next month with plans that are approved by NOAA, Mr. Carberg, as well as hopefully Mr. Chair, before we go to the planning board. So just to make sure that's super clear. We intend to be a great tenant for the next 40 years. Are there any other questions I can answer?
I would just clarify, I would be happy to give input, but I have no authority as a
Please,
chair,
yeah,
as a, a sole approval granting. We're a commission, of five. And so if it's the actual tenant alteration application, then that's before the commission. But I wouldn't singularly be able, just so that we're clear on a process to approve something without, the commission is who is the authority essentially that approves and denies things. So just for clarity on that. And I guess we will have to wait to see your plans. You mentioned your ideal customer, but concern just of sort of the intensity of use that I would have is that the paying customer does isn't the ideal, and what kind of controls are in place that somebody doesn't choose to say operate a business out of there. Carpenter that shows up every morning, puts all his tape, puts his stuff away, comes back in the morning. I mean, as we all know, there's a lack of commercial space and availability, and I could see that there's a fair amount of perhaps need, but use for that. And I think as a property owner, that's something that, whether it falls under the airport as property owner and discussing the use in your tenant alteration application, and or whether it's layered with the planning board. And I know that having been through the other planning board processes, I think there's been conditions imposed on other projects about the business operations. And so, knowing whether or not, and you don't have to answer this tonight as you work with your engineer and come up with kind of your business plan. I know that's something I would want to see we had an assurance of, that it's not 34 businesses
Right.
being run out
That
of
would
these
be a
containers.
disaster.
Right. But unfortunately, as economic realities, they're paying the rent. And if there isn't a check and balance to that, and part of that comes back to then, I think, you'd have a higher parking demand. I noted in one of the applications that you weren't essentially proposing parking per unit, right? And fair enough, we don't expect that 34 people show up to a storage unit at one time. And I don't want to go too far into the exact details, but depending on how that is operated, what's the check and balance, I think there's a concern I would have a concern, whether the airport shares it, of an intensity of use and traffic out of the site that I really believe was envisioned as an impound lot, right? And now it's sort of taking a different direction. And then in terms of the parking in the area of the buildings, I mean, I think that there's a requirement of the lease. So we're gonna have to see the plan that really has that. And ultimately, the hope is, I thought all along with the RFP, that there was more than just the towing of the airport vehicles.
Can I speak to
Yeah, please.
to the parking specifically? When we created the Tomahawk Road storage facilities, 64,000 square feet, and we got a variance for parking because it's just a low intensity use. I think we had 6 or 8 spaces for 64,000 square feet building. So I feel that the planning board will probably have parallel thoughts on this and make for sure that we wouldn't have a whole lot of parking just because it's not needed.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I don't want us to be argumentative anyway, but that I think that kind of a facility that, and there's been some other ones too, is a little bit different than storage containers, right? Steel storage containers that people are just pulling up to. So I think that, again, the business aspect, it's not so much, you say the ideal is the once a year, but what stops that from being three times a day?
Yeah.
Times 34 unit. I mean, I don't expect, but I think we should consider bookends when we talk about these things. You talk about the guy that comes twice a year, but let's talk or the client or the leasee, subleasee. And that's really what this sort of is. It's sort of a sublease of your lease to individuals on these. So I think that's a little bit different as well, of something that we've sort of seen before. So many users of a piece of airport land.
So Arthur, you're concerned about traffic back there on Boca Road.
Traffic backing up, it would certainly be a concern, as well as general congestion, and then as well as making sure our real purpose in putting this RFP out was an impound lot. So that.
So suddenly we have a different business.
Suddenly we have, right, and
Yeah.
so how do we make sure, before we start down on this long lease and this long road, and that, that there are not misunderstandings. Sometimes these more difficult discussions could help hopefully have, avoid misunderstandings that it could be costly to, or, unpleasant, whatever you want to say, versus because you've talked about it a little bit, come to an understanding.
How long a lease are we talking about?
I think it's a 30-year lease.
30-year lease.
Right, so the foot we started on.
Would it make any sense to make it a shorter lease? Then we could gauge how this business is going. And we will be able to revisit it in 5 years.
Cover it.
I don't know, but.
I would defer that question to someone with more commercial lease experience.
Yeah.
I think
Arthur,
lease
you're in
is,
business on this island. You've got a better idea of what goes on back there than I do, but it seems to me that we want people to we want to lease land to people
Yep.
back here. No question, we want those type of tenants. You're concerned about the type of tenant this is. We would be able to better gauge what kind of a tenant this is if we had a shorter time frame, and we could say, hey, 5 years, this is a commercial parking lot. It's a lot of traffic. We don't like it.
the lease is signed.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with Mr.
Yeah.
Smith has the lease, and
Well-
now it's a land use question.
Well, how much control do we have over it now that we have a signed lease?
That's part of, I think, what we're talking
Yeah.
about here, right?
Mhm.
Is that, did the lease, and you have, I believe, a tenant alteration application that we would be looking at here. So again, I think it's much better. It's a mutual relationship, the property owner and leaseholder, and to have a discussion at this point for Mr. Smith's about to put in significant capital investments into this property. And so, to head off any, misunderstandings and, any ambiguity that there may be, all leases language could be interpreted, by different councils, if you will. And I'm not saying that's sort of where we're at, but I really, want to make sure that the storage piece of things and the parking and that I think that, that's just making sure that there is, in fact, that the concern's been raised early on. Got to manage your property, you got to manage your leasehold. You don't want to hear from a property owner about a concern. And so there's going to be an aspect of that. And then there's the impound operation and making sure that there is the available space there needs to be for the vehicles that are towed.
You have a contract with the town to impound vehicles or
I have, my phone is ringing off the hook.
really?
NIR is very interested in me towing all of the A and B parking lot. Richmond would like me to do the entire area. Multiple HOAs have called me for help. I don't know if we're gonna need any area for storage at this point.
Okay,
So
he leased this property as an impound lot. It sounds like that's where he's headed.
Well, I leased this area. The RFP said you gotta do the impound, but you can have another side business to make up the money that impound might be a deficit. Is that correct?
Yes.
So my idea was to have storage, which is a business that I know, and I love. And then impound, which is a business I don't know and dislike. I'm the tree guy and the container guy. I'm not the tow guy. And I don't think anybody likes the tow guy. I don't want to become the tow guy, but we're going to work with Norman and a few other people around the community to be able to offer this service, which we've already done. I anticipate the whole lot being full probably whenever I get the green light in 4 weeks. Just in a week.
Full of vehicles that have been towed there.
It's crazy.
So it doesn't sound like there's much scope for people to run a business out of your lot. In other words, parking their cars there.
I'm not gonna be, I'm not gonna be allowed to do any storage for a while. Because of going through the planning board process. I will be allowed to tow immediately after I get through, let me back up. It's gonna take a little bit more time for me to get the storage business going, up and going. I can operate immediately after planning board approval, hopefully in July for the towing business. And the summer months is when we need this the most. So my anticipation is that this lot's probably gonna be full on week 2. With some night towing at the A&P and Richmond, and it's a nightmare. That hopefully we'll be able to help solve.
Well, that's great, and it's really encouraging to
Yeah.
hear. However, when you could have planning board approval, that this is where the devil's in the details. The plan that was just proposed had no impound storage area. It had all storage business, and I don't want to, you've agreed to change it, but
It has been changed.
and so there was only 5 parking spaces shown, which were essentially 4 of which are required by zoning for the proposed uses. And that's what I mean about making sure that, and that's what Mr. Smith's here, he says he's gonna work on. At the same time, I really hope, I mean, while you say it's a nightmare, it's truly, I think, a need for the greater public good, ultimately.
That's how I've had to shift my brain,
You
and not
know.
being the rural tow guy, but
No.
helping my local community, business owners downtown. I don't go to the A&P to shop. I don't go to Backyard Barbecue to eat because there's no spot. But if this is enforced, it will change. There'll be more turnover. Businesses will survive a little bit better. It's a great thing for the community. I just have to figure out, how I cannot be the evil tow guy.
The enforcer of the rule is not the bad guy, right? I understand there's a perception, right? But, it's whether it's policing or whatnot,
Yeah.
right? There are, there are rules, I not all like them, that are in place for the greater public good. And, without enforcement, there's no compliance, and that's the truth of, and it's gone on a long time here for various reasons. Now, that being said, that starts to go a little afield, I think, of the airport commission, where here, I think, as landholders that tried to provide, we had land, try to have it be a win-win. I think that the airport really has to recognize revenue from its land in accordance with the grant assurances. Got non-aeronautical revenue. That's what we need, to the point. But it's making, to the extent we can, being on the same page with how, any leaseholder. And I think that, Mr. Carberg and I had a brief discussion, and I think it's worth further discussion at the commission level. Whether another position is needed. The airport is moving in such a direction with so much, land leases and uses. And is there someone that does, you have a position of someone who really specializes in-house in managing compliance, leases, and then you've got your aviation. We all can't be experts in everything. And so just something I think that does warrant further discussion. Perhaps it's even a master plan item, was something that I thought about.
Are we
But
looking for a decision tonight on this? or-
no, I don't think so. I think it's informational.
Yeah.
Yep.
About the
And-
lease. Does the leasehold allow, does the leasehold restrict him from doing anything? The written language of it.
I'll defer, and I don't think we have counsel, but my understanding is it doesn't so much restrict as require certain uses, which is a certain amount of land for impound vehicles, as well as to tow a certain amount of vehicles on an annual basis from the airport lot. And so, I think it allows for this ancillary use of the storage. How that gets shifted out and, and operated, I think is really the discussion. And, what can we do to really help facilitate? This has to be hopefully a mutually beneficial relationship, with a long-term leaseholder. That, the airport recognizes revenue, the community receives service that's needed. Mr. Smith, as a businessman in our capitalist society, also recognizes a profit as you should. This isn't a nonprofit operation. That's, fair enough. And I think that's where and maybe that's my idealistic, much like your idealistic customer. So I guess I don't want to, I think that's where we're at, is that we saw our planning board application, that didn't, we believe, I think, meet the requirements of the lease. So it's to open up a discussion, and it's not to, and then it's just made some commitments. We'll see what he comes back with, and
One question that I do have, and I would ask for a possible decision. It might be with council, is in the lease. It had 15 spots that were dedicated, minimum of 15 spots that are dedicated to impound use. 6,795 square feet. And language was inserted that it was a maximum of 20 vehicles. And I don't know why that was put in there. To be able to be in business, I have to staff this, unfortunately, 7 days a week. There's going to be some significant costs to do that.
So you need security out there. If you're impounding vehicles, obviously you're responsible for the security of those vehicles.
Absolutely. And so to only have 20 cars, it won't be a break even, it'll be a loss.
No,
Okay.
So I'm
definitely.
wondering if it's reasonable to lift that 20 vehicles. Because 20 vehicles probably pay for, like, just to pay the rent. And was there a reason that 20 was in there?
Yeah, so there are two reasons. The first is, what I'd say is that Mass General, well, I'll reverse, I'll start with the other one. The reason we picked 20 vehicles is that we really envisioned that this wouldn't be a lot where people would be abandoning their cars. This would be a lot where people make mistakes and they have their cars towed and they want their cars back. So a cap, in our opinion, needs to exist to promote, cycling in and we wouldn't have wanted a successful respondent to just tow 20 junk cars, put them in the lot and sit on them and then not be able to provide impound services. So we want a cap to apply. Specifically the RFP. I think the RFP listed this cap, and it's important from a Mass General law, from a bid standpoint. If that cap hadn't existed in the RFP, someone else might have responded with a different business idea. So it's important that we review that with council. I'd say that I am not at all against looking into a cap, because from what I've heard is that you're saying you anticipate such an initial crush of volume, it'll be a few months until you would be able to pursue self-storage containers that you might need for a short period to be beyond that cap. And that's, I think, something that, tenant, airport manager, airport staff could administer in writing to define the cap and the duration and find something. I don't think it would be to the level of a lease amendment, or at least not yet.
What I'm understanding, what kind of the conversations that I've had with you before are that we want to process these cars and get them the hell out of there as soon as possible. Massachusetts law is that you have to have the car for 3 months before you can do the paperwork to, if it's an abandoned car, that you have 3 months before you can jump it. Those are not our ideal customers because they don't pay. We're giving Bamber and having to pay him to get rid of them. So that's the way that you make money in this business, is just getting them processed as fast as possible. That being said, my estimates are about 25% of the cars that are going to be coming are going to be sitting there for 3 months at a time, clogging up the spaces that we need to be able to service the airport and our community. So I want to just have an ongoing conversation about where this cap can be and needs to be, but thinking about this business way too much, having a cap of 20, we can do 20 in a night. I think we keep right one. If there's 80 spots there that need to be towed every night. So I need some space.
So it sounds like the town is looking at a towing program Clear out the parking.
Nantucket Island Resorts owns that lot,
Yeah,
and that's my core customer. That's been begging me to do this business for about a year and a half now.
Yeah, it's not the town.
okay.
Correct.
I a couple of thoughts or questions as we just, we're kind of kicking it around. So this isn't a commitment. This is, just, we're having a bit of a free flowing discussion at commission level, but perhaps there was a certain amount of vehicles that were allocated for the longer term storage, if the cap was to be increased, and that, maybe there's the 20 that are over 30 days. Right? Maybe there's something like that. Again, the policing is also I don't think want to be in a position of, maybe it's a general reporting of month to month, but ideally this isn't a, like someone showing up and saying, how long's that car been there? Right. And the other is, I would think that if there was going to be some modification of that it really has to be for towed vehicles, and that this isn't, winter storage of vehicles. In other words, that I think was part of the thinking too, is how do you, and how this language might, or an agreement or a modification might come apart is that, and we don't want to fund, something that, oh, well, I towed the brand new Jeep there so it could stay there for the winter, right? It's like really that's
black and-
there's really, in other words, it's not seasonal storage of vehicles. If there was to be an increase, I really think that somehow it has to be worded in a way that it's for the purpose, right? The purpose of the RFP was the impound lot. If there are towed vehicles, I can understand that you've got that sort of split. There's the people that are either going to come in the first 3 days because they need their car back, or a day or 24, what have you. And that's ideal probably from that situation. Or then there's the people that just walked and so.
I'm kind of, I just don't quite understand, and this question would be to Mr. Carver. What would be the negative aspect of having 200 cars on the lot? Is it environmental? I just don't understand why there would be. I'm at a loss for understanding.
It's thing, it's to keep, we want to make sure cars are cycling in and out of the lot, and that's what we had envisioned.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So if I can report that and,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint as manager, I would be happy to work with you. I'd say, helpful items are, here's what we've done, here's our breakdown of long-term versus short-term. So here's what we think we need for spots.
those cars at 3 months are a loss, and at 4 months, they're a big loss. So I'm gonna be processing those cars as fast as possible to get them out. So I'm confident of that.
And I think there's one important piece of, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
Important piece of context for the commission is that, as Mr. Smith mentioned, I believe it's the State Department of Public Utilities that regulates impound lots, and they actually regulate the fees. You pay the same fee
Correct.
that you do in the Berkshires as you would in Cambridge or Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket, which that's one of the reasons why the island doesn't support an impound lot, is that it, unless you have free land, it doesn't make economic sense for fair market value. So that was our reason for pairing the impound function with a storage function. So that's something that we hadn't seen before. We worked with council to draft the RFP. And I think that's part of the growing pains for our process. We don't just have leaseholds of people storing piles of soil. We have more and more complicated lease and business endeavors where we're partners with our tenants.
Well, we know we want to be in the business of leasing land. This is a different business. I understand we're trying to evaluate how that goes, and I certainly support Mr. Smith's business if we can understand it
Right,
and
yeah,
accept it.
I appreciate that.
yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. We're free market people here.
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
sort of what I was trying to,
And thank you very much we spent a lot of time tonight. I appreciate.
No, it's important. It's a long-term, where you're gonna be here longer than
I'm gonna be
us,
here longer, yeah.
most of, at least at this table. I'll be here, but it won't be at this table. And so that's where I think it's just so important for, starting off with understanding and that. So we'll look forward to hearing, it's really your proposal, I think, to make and review. And at that point, we'll the increased vehicles, let's see if there's a way to do it. I think it's preferred to the storage. Now you still need some piece of it, but what you bring forward, we'll certainly review and hopefully we get there.
To run this business, you need planning board approval first. Then you come to us. How do you?
I'm gonna ask the same question.
Yeah.
I think, planning board and then tenant alteration application after that.
Okay,
But I would like to run it through the board before it goes to the planning board.
you want to run it through here?
I would like for you to see have your eyes on it, to kind of get a blessing before I go in front of the
Certainly.
planning board, if that's okay.
Continue this with the commission's understanding.
Yeah, and likewise, we can't have group discussion without, a posted meeting, very
Understood.
cognizant of open meeting law. However, Mr. Carberg certainly
Yeah.
could distribute the plan. No, well, there's a way. Is that individual commissioners could respond with any comments to Mr. Carberg. And that would really be, I think, the appropriate mechanism for doing that. Whatever you file, it goes to everybody. But we don't reply all. Any comments are back to Mr. Carberg. He synthesizes them all. And then you certainly be able to give you a sense of where things are, hopefully help you be able to proceed. We know there's a meeting in a month
Yeah,
and keep going in the right direction.
that sounds great. I've been kind of just hands tied behind my back because of the paper road so far. And now we're able to move forward. So trying to do that.
That'd be
in a
like
speedy
support
way.
his situation on an expedited basis.
Yeah, well, there's a meeting in a month, let's see what he has, and
Yeah.
certainly it's up to you. Really, the faster that you come back with things, then the more, and I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
Paying consultants and what have you.
Wish you the best of luck.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you for your time.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
God bless.
Anything further on that, Mr. Carberg?
Nope.
So we'll move on to the manager's report.
Okay, for our project
Haven't done
update,
that yet.
taxiway golf is done and will come off the list. North ramp hard stands, they're installed, concrete passed for performance. The A220 is officially on the schedule for September 4th, but we will see it beforehand in an irregular operation capacity. Runway, the rest of my projects we've covered already. For non-AIP projects, we're working forward on relocating the fence for the bunker area. We need to engage the tenant. That's on us to do and come up with a plan. Same with the South Shore. It was pushed back due to permitting for a single plant issue. It was a late spring. We're pursuing additional federal resiliency grant funding for that project. On RFP bid status, we've received 4 proposals for 33 Bunker Road, and these are under internal review. We discussed modular housing previously. The invitation for bids for fuel farm inspections will be available to the public on June 20th and due July 12th. Operations update, all of our fire safety related items have been closed out. These were due to signage. Al was a huge help. Al Coffin was a huge help with that. The other compliance items were for airfield markings, for surface painted taxiway signs. We've already painted those. We added a double yellow dash on another item. The big item here still to complete is the aiming points in the touchdown zone and threshold markings on 624. We will have a night closure to complete that work, probably several night closures. Fuel supply, we've received a draft agreement and council is reviewing. We're topped off with Jet A and we're keeping an eye on our logistical chain for deliveries. As you heard, Paper Street was extinguished at the planning board meeting previously. Update on the fuel revolver. I attended the recent planning and select board meetings. They approved our fuel revolver increase. I'd like to thank those boards. The Army Corps of Engineer will perform its, I believe, annual military munition education training on site. I'm on Nantucket on June 27th. We will send one representative, but I believe it's open to the public as well. For statistics, I wanted to start with two new items before I go very quickly through the remaining statistics. Both are works in progress. It's the first time I'm bringing them to the board, but I think they're interesting and important. We made APU monitoring. See if you can bring. There we go. We made APU monitoring a priority this season. Our goal is to audit 10% of business jet departures. We are 1 month in for May and reviewing those results. We audited 26 departures, and we showed 395 business jet arrivals. So it's not necessarily apples to apples, our FBO software catalogs arrivals, because those are the point of sale. But it's useful. Eventually those aircraft depart. So that's a 6.6% rate. Part of what we're doing is seeing if 10% is a reasonable effort. So again, this is in progress. It's the first month. We had 22 initial warnings to the pilot and command. We're working on consistency and reporting to our software among staff. We have new staff, many of which are seasonal. We had 2 second warnings. We think the program is working. The pilots either shut down or they gave a reason that checks out, sort of an imminent arrival, flight plan is loaded. We also had 4 medical transports. We note them, they are exempt from noise complaints and APU monitoring. We're not going out and picking on Boston MedFlight or Coast Guard. But this tool is really useful for logging those, because a lot of noise complaints do come back to MedFlight operations, you know. IFR, whether a Coast Guard helicopter or fixed wing aircraft, will run hot for priority transport. Is there a second page for that?
I think that was it.
No, just
Okay.
one page, but do you want the TNC stats?
Yeah, we'll grant the
Okay.
TNC stats. Thank you. So we have been receiving TNC, or Transportation Network Company, the Uber and Lyfts of the world, activity and fee reports since January. TNCs account for about 21% of passenger pickups. So we peg our received TNC data to our daily secure arrival count. Again, not apples to apples, but we have both in daily format. So we use them for tracking. You know, not every pickup is necessarily a passenger. Someone could have come here for lunch, an employee could have been dropped off. And we assume one pickup for one passenger, which is probably not the case. People tend to travel in pairs or families. But again, it's a consistent daily comparison that we can make again and again. So this 21% would be a very high rate nationwide. SFO, San Francisco, home of tech, early adopter, they have one of the highest rates known to the industry. They're at 18%. The revenue generation that we're tracking is 68 cents per TSA and plane passengers per passenger, with Lyft still to report for May. That's one reason why May may be trending below. Highest number of daily Uber pickups I've seen so far was 130, and that was for the Friday of Wine Festival. It's interesting to me for 2 reasons, this data set in general. First is that I'm forecasting a revenue center of $87,000 annually, which is enough to fund a position, more or less, our ground transportation coordinator, for example. But you combine this revenue with our parking lot revenue, our taxi cab and fee program, and we have an important cost center to understand. And then also a pickup rate of 21% for TNCs is a big change from 0 5 years ago when these didn't exist. So it's good for the airport and for our planners to understand how this influences curb front design and how people use the terminal, arrive to the airport, and then use our road network. I'll share this with town planning staff as well, but I wanted the commission to see it first. And then I'll move into stats. And I'll work on these formats and integrating them into the stats as we go forward. So for April, total ops are up 4.8%. Year to date, they're down 10%. Southwest ramp operations are down 9% in April. Emplanements were up 44% in April, and they're still down year to date on 3%. Year to date, 3%. Cape Air for April, Boston was up 14%, New Bedford was up 64%, Hyannis was up 434%, so that's 652 passengers versus 122 the year before, which is really encouraging to see.
Mhm.
Vineyard was up 36%. Jet A stats as of May 31st, sales are up overall 4.2% from the 3-year average. And again, the 3-year average is what we use to track and plan for revenue and for logistics. Up 6.5% over the past 3 months and 11.6% over the previous month. FBO is down 2.7% for the year to date, up 3.6 over the last 3 months, up 8.4 over last May. May was busy despite the weather not being ideal. And the terminal sales won't update until next month. Low lead is down 12% over the 3-year average, up almost 5% over the last 3 months, and up almost 10% over the past month. Freight was up 2%, but remains down 6% year to date. Cape Air Freight was up significantly. I saw them advertising the service, so it's probably due to that. I think it's a great service that we have there. The mail and UPS were down. UPS is up. I'm sorry, I mentioned that. FedEx, there's a change in the carrier that's noted in the stats, but collectively across the carriers, it's down 23%. Then we had 2 noise calls in April. Personnel report, we're advertising for a custodian and a business manager currently. Seasonal staff, most of them are here, a few more are arriving. We have 19 seasonal staff this year. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any comments, questions?
I was gonna question about Jamie. Is she still with us and how long is she staying?
So Ms. Sandsbury is with us in a part-time role for a not currently defined period of time. So we're glad to have her in that role.
Yes, I figured. Thank you.
No question.
Mr. Karen, I just comment, thank you very much for the APU monitoring of the report, and I think that's a real step in the right direction. I also hope the public notes that as part of, I think, the
Absolutely, yes.
commitment that was
Yeah.
made for ramp management, and that's obviously taking staff time that, you've got competing duties, and it's appreciated. Thank you. With that, are there any commissioners' comments?
Thank you.
I think I probably made all of mine through the meeting. I did have a site tour of the project, which I very much appreciate both the resident engineer and Mr. Carberg making the time for that. And yep, so I think that will move us on to public comment. Is there anybody from the public with comment?
Yes. Meredith Lepre.
Ms. Lepre, the floor is yours. You're muted. There you go.
Hey, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I just heard that Noah said you guys had 2 noise complaints from April. I think that your numbers for May and June are going to be significantly higher. I called 3 or 4 times or emailed Noah last week and had to actually call the police because the South Ramp project trucks are running at 6 a.m., 6:30. I hear the beeping, and I don't even live next to there. And I feel that with all of the contamination from PFAS, us having to worry for our families and have extra screening, there are 3 people that have cancer likely related to that. Their homes are being invaded by this South Apron project, which is ill-conceived. But I think the least you could do is not even turn a truck on till 7 a.m. And I know Noah wrote me back and said that the people that work there aren't even there yet, but somebody had the trucks going and I sent him a video. So I don't know if there are fairies that live on the airport or what, but I really would appreciate it if nothing was turned on until 7 a.m. because that is the town sound bylaw for sound ordinance. And If I continue hearing it, I plan to continue calling the police. So I really would appreciate it if I could just enjoy a quiet morning at my home with my children. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lepre. Are there any other members of the public? Yes. Mr. Golding,
Hi, this is Vincent Goulding. Can you hear me?
we can. The floor is yours, Mr. Golding.
So I wanted to talk about the RFP proposal that I submitted. I wanted to see what was going on with that and would like to discuss it a little bit more.
So Mr. Golding, I appreciate that. It is public comment, but I would say that if you submitted a formal proposal, you may not wish to, prejudice that or make, you might want to just meet with the manager or let that process go through the process as opposed to
Making it
public comments. However, you could say we're not here. We cannot, you're welcome to make any comments that you would like under the policy for up to 3 minutes, but I only offer that. And thank you very much for responding to an RFP. It's much appreciated. But we can't really have a discussion, if you will, from our end. It would just be to receive any comments you wanted to make, whereas, so anyway, it's up to you.
Yeah, I was just looking to see what was going on with the process and wanted to go over, my business plan for the 33 Bunker Road property.
Again, it would be best to contact the airport administration, and they can, I think, direct you further on that.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much.
As a commission, we simply, it's in process. I think that's the most that we really could offer for you on that.
Is there there's no timeline on it at the moment?
Again, we as the commissioners wouldn't have that, but I would just defer you really. I'm not trying to, I think it's really something to take up with the administration.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, and again, thank you for going through the process and filing a proposal.
All right, thank you.
Certainly. Is there anybody else? Okay, thank you. With that, I would entertain a motion to move into executive session per general law, chapter 30A, section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda for possible release and for review and possible release. To discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. To discuss with respect to potential litigation regarding Turo, where the chair has determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Ms. Taubman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Scarron?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you all. Thank you.